Let's watch Jessica Tarlov, the lone liberal on Fox News The Five, discussing with her MAGA co-host Kamala's concession speech and what possibly could have gone so wrong for Democrats to allow such a sweeping Republican victory.
There is definitely a bit of the VP blame game going on. I mean, these margins, 0.5% swing towards Trump in Wisconsin, 18,000 votes, 38,000 votes in Michigan, 78,000 votes in Pennsylvania. Would Josh Shapiro have at least appeared as a moderating force? We know that she didn't do as well with Jewish voters as past Democratic candidates. But I do think, I agree with Jesse that this was about the fundamentals of the race.
I think there's a couple key margins to look at when trying to discuss what went wrong for Democrats and what happened and where we can change. And the biggest one is among young men. 18 to 29, that age group, Trump got 47% of them, which is a lot for Republicans, historically speaking, at least, increasing the support that they got for Trump, while Harris lost support that Democrats usually receive. And I think it speaks to the way that Republicans have managed to insert themselves and control the media apparatus, especially in this day and age with social media. If you look at the way that young people are getting their information, it's predominantly social media. It's predominantly Twitter, to be specific, and then also on things like Joe Rogan, through podcasts on YouTube, from streamers, right? These are where how younger people are getting their information, especially politically, and they're overwhelmingly mechanisms that are controlled by the right. I mean, Twitter is owned by Elon Musk, who personally shares negative Democrat propaganda and then full throat shows support for Republicans while also bribing people with $1 million to vote red. And then if you look at new media, it's controlled by the likes of Joe Rogan, Tim Pool, The Daily Wire. These are by and far the biggest new media creators, all full throat Republicans. Most large podcasters lean right if you're just looking at the field of them. Most streamers in the gaming sphere lean right, where a lot of young people are watching these kind of Twitch streamers, Kick streamers, Rumble, all of these things. And these are people who are parroting right-wing perspectives, right-wing kind of talking points, even if they're not inherently political creators. And it's shaping the Overton window for younger people to lean more right-wing. And it's this kind of machine that Democrats were just unable to contend with in this election cycle, not having outlets that exist like that on their side to reach younger voters. And then Kamala, I think, misstepping by not appearing on these kinds of shows herself. She thought she could combat it by appearing on podcasts like Call Her Daddy, like more left-wing podcasts, but they pale in comparison to the reach of these more right-wing new media stations and podcasts. And I think that was a big misstep for her to not go on the Rogans, on the Andrew Schultz, and on all of these kinds of channels.
I don't know if you've seen that New York Times chart with the arrows, the red arrows. They are everywhere, and they are all going in that direction. I mean, he outperformed 2020 every single place on the map. And I don't think that having a different VP on the ticket would have made a difference on that. The only thing that probably would have had any shot at changing things would have been if there had been a real primary a year ago. And maybe Kamala Harris would have been victorious in it. I don't know, but maybe you would have had Gretchen Whitmer or Wes Moore or Josh Shapiro at the top of the ticket, and that could have been different. But this was a fundamentals election, and like I said, a lot of people telling the Democratic Party, we don't like what you're selling.
I don't think having a different VP would have swung anything differently, and I don't think moderating more was what was needed. I think Kamala did a fine job of moderating, if anything, and it may partially be what costed her the election in terms of it killed progressive and left-wing support that would have came out to vote for her, where I think in 2020, you had a lot of leftists and a lot of progressives biting the bullet and coming out to support Biden in a sort of anti-Trump vote. They weren't that willing to do so with Kamala, whether it be from Gaza, whether it be from like the Cheney endorsements and campaigning with Liz Cheney on the trail and trying to reach out to Republicans more so than reach out to the left. Democrats need to learn that they don't have this machine that Republicans have where they can just run on saying the other side is bad, right? Republicans can get away with this because they can just pound the misinformation into your head with repeated talking points on the largest mainstream media station in America, and that being Fox News, and the biggest new media stations like Daily Wire or Tim Pool on local radio through Sinclair Media. So they have this way of saying the other side's bad, but then keeping it in the forefront of the media narrative through local radio, mainstream media, through podcasts, in a way that the Democrats can't. So trying to run on Trump bad as a platform is just an uphill battle. So I think one of the best things Democrats can do is finding a pushback to the misinformation machine that Republicans control. And doing that with new media will be key. Growing new media channels like myself, Brian Tyler Cohen, Pondering Politics, Luke Beasley, etc., so that we have a reach in this capacity that mirrors what Republicans do. And also doing this on like social media platforms like X. If you look at all the biggest X creators, X profiles that talk about politics, all of them skew right as well. So we need to catch up to Republicans in this regard. And then second, I think running a Bernie-esque campaign is the right thing to do, right? I think that Bernie figured it out in that kind of economic populism that he really leaned into, mobilized not only the ethnic vote that you have to have show up for you to win as a Democrat, as well as he mobilized white union voters in a way that the Democrat Party is definitely missing, that for all his negatives, I think Biden actually did really well reaching out to the white union vote, right? Something that Kamala was never really able to keep up to strides with Biden on. And we were put at a disadvantage when speaking about Biden, that despite him saying he would be a transitional president, despite it probably being best had he been a transitional president, he decided to break that and go on to try and run again, then having to drop out late in the campaign. So Kamala had a rush campaign, as well as we didn't get the benefit of her winning a primary and gaining support that way. So I am proud of what she managed to accomplish in 100 days. But when you look at a 100-day campaign versus Trump, who essentially got to run for 2 years, you can see the disadvantage that was inherently built in. I do think that there are correctable missteps. And I do think that right now isn't a time for us to give up, to feel defeated, or to stray away from politics. I think we can take this as a learning, as a lesson, really, and we can move forward from this to better prepare ourselves next time. Getting engaged now means more than it ever did. Starting to grow our defensives to this kind of misinformation machine that costed us this election, educating and motivating possible voters so we're sure to be more prepared for the next cycle to combat the Fox Newses, the Tim Pools, the Joe Rogans, because if people are already informed, we're not having to rush in to try and correct all these lies that they're getting force-fed because they would already know better. That's another place I think we lost. And when Trump is going on stations like the Joe Rogans, right, and getting 50 million views directly associated with younger impressionable voters, and the left doesn't have anything like this that they can go on and reach out to, you can kind of see again where we need to catch up, right? When younger voters are being force-fed these kind of right-wing perspectives, even in non-political ways, from any of the content they digest, again, the left doesn't just have that. If you're a younger male, the chances that you're going to go on Twitch, even just to watch games, let's just talk about gaming, right? That you're going to find a streamer who games, maybe they talk about politics a little bit, and that they're going to be left-wing is like 1 in 10, where the chances they're going to be right-wing is like 9 in 10. And as long as that exists, we're always going to have this massive hill to climb up. So doing the work now to spread the political literacy, the media literacy, political knowledge, and actual facts will help us from where we essentially lost because of feelings in this election, all because of bigotry as well, if I'm being clear. Racism and misogyny no doubt played a massive factor in this race, but ultimately right-wingers have played to people's feelings and used that to create these dramatized narratives that really hit home, and no level of correction was enough from the Democrats because we failed the last 4 years from really teaching people or installing this kind of knowledge, this kind of media literacy in them the way we should. So now isn't a time to fall victim to the same mistakes and be just as unprepared in 2028.